But with kissing, they've actually found that kissing may be a part of microbiome sampling.
Interesting.
So yeah, so people are sharing microbes. The number that they've found is about 80 million microbes are being shared during a passionate kiss, and that there is natural attraction that we have to certain microbial patterns. And I think we can all relate to this, where you're on a date and there's just something that the vibe is not right, and it's not like a personality thing. It's just like there's something that's there.
You're right.
Right? Your gut sense is telling you something is wrong. And that might be the explanation for this.
I'm fully convinced now that bacteria make all the plans. They're in charge. It's just how do we replicate the microbiome, and then we just use our monkey brain to rationalize all of our actions based on our self-identity. That's the main takeaway I'm getting from this.
Evan, you started as my acolyte, and now I feel like I've created a monster. You asked me the question that made me very happy and excited, which is that, you asked me about evolution. Think about our origins as humans for a moment. We lived for 99.999% of human history in tribes. And it was a daily fight for survival, literally. Whether that was finding resources or that was defending ourselves from threats, including other humans. And we were better if we were together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those connections that existed, they became directly aligned with our survival. And you knew, like Evan, if we were in a tribe together, I knew that if we get invaded, Evan's going to step up and protect me. And you know what? I'm going to do the same for him.
I got your back. Absolutely.
Right. And that's where we came from. Right. So we have to understand that hardwired into our body is that natural desire for human connection, because that has always been the measure of health. That has always been the measure of survival. And we've created much more recently, these new human concepts, human constructs of wealth and like, wanting to have a nice house or a nice car and things like
Marriage,
this, and have money.
Yeah.
Right. We've developed these new constructs, but it doesn't, those things actually are like a false totem in a way. Like we're worshiping the wrong thing, because it's just in a way a distraction, because actually like true satisfaction and happiness actually starts with just the human connection. This is our origin story. So, and I think that in a powerful way, you see this, whether you look at the blue zones across the planet, or just think about us on an individual basis, that when we are connected to one another in a powerful way, we are healthier, we are more at ease. It activates our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of what I'm talking about with corticotropin releasing hormone. We activate our parasympathetic nervous system by holding hands, by kissing, by hugging, by being in connected relationships with one another. There's so many different ways in which this manifests in terms of our health. And I think that the issue that we have on a very powerful level in the Western world right now is that we're having a crisis of loneliness. People are not connected to one another, because the connections that we need are not, hey, someone gave me a like on my social media, right? And therefore I feel good about myself. No. It's not that rational. It has to get down to real connection, where I know that you got my back and I got yours.
Right. And how do you think the microbiome links in with our desire and need for social connection? I was speaking to a social neuroscientist called Taylor Guthrie on the podcast a few weeks ago, and we started talking about this really amazing thing about human beings, where one of the reasons that we survive in large social networks is that we offload our emotional burden to them. And that allows our behavioral repertoire to be a lot more complex than it would be alone. So we actually need people to regulate our emotions, need people to regulate our behavior. You offload a lot of that to your partner when you have a partner, when you have a tribe, when you have family. Yeah. I wonder how much of that is also works in a similar way to the microbiome, in that do you with your partner sort of have this conjoined microbiome, which is more sophisticated, more diverse, and more powerful than even one person's could be on its own?
So you're coming upon the questions that scientists have been asking, and we're starting to see the answers emerging in new studies. And
Cool.
so it's quite fascinating. A quick comment before I dig into answering your question. I just want to say that I totally agree. We do need a partner to offload, but it has to be a true connection.
Yeah.
Whereas and the flip side is like I feel like Facebook was the start of something that actually was harmful
Right.
because when we're connected to 3,000 people, like we're not a tribe was never 3,000 people, right? A tribe was 50 people. And so when we're connected to 3,000 people and we hear all of the trauma and bad things that are happening in their lives, we internalize that. And that's actually very stressful for us.
Right.
So anyway, these are the downsides of social media.
Yeah. And which there are many, and which I agree with you on.
Yeah. So, okay. But if we're talking about getting back to organic human connection, why do we kiss? Why do we hold hands? Why do we shake hands? Why do we give a high five and have that be meaningful? Why do we hug? These are universal forms of communication that exist across cultures,
Yeah.
across the globe that were independently developed. Why would this be? I think that there's a compelling argument that the gut microbes are part of the story.
Cool.
So, yeah. So like to shake hands is to share microbes.
Right.
And there's implicit trust. I trust that your microbiome is healthy and you're not giving me some vicious disease, right? Some vicious virus or something like this.
Yes.
But with kissing, they've actually found that kissing may be a part of microbiome sampling.
Interesting.
So, yeah. So people are sharing microbes. The number that they've found is about 80 million microbes are being shared during a passionate kiss. 80 million microbes.
It's insane.
Yeah. There's some evidence to suggest that our smells, like our pheromones, are microbial in origin, and that there is natural attraction that we have to certain microbial patterns. And I think we can all relate to this, where you're on a date and there's just something that the vibe is not right, and it's not like a personality thing. It's just like there's something that's there,
You're right.
right? Your gut sense is telling you something is wrong. And that might be the explanation for this. But I think the most interesting and compelling evidence is that they did this study among couples who cohabitate. And they found that cohabitation leads to the sharing of microbes. Now, naturally, you would say, okay, well, is that just because they're eating the same food? Like they're sharing meals together. Isn't that the issue? The answer was no. They controlled for dietary patterns. And they found that despite that, people still had the sharing of microbes. And then when they dug into this even more, they found that people with the healthiest microbiome, with the most diversity in their microbiome, were the people that were in lasting committed relationships.
Interesting.
And beyond that, if you scored your relationship as being healthy, in other words, if you said when they asked you, I feel very strongly connected to my partner, if you said yes, those were the people with the absolute healthiest microbiomes, and they shared more microbes together than they would share with their own siblings, which is interesting because, like, you know, if you think about your siblings, you are raised together in the same house, you share genetics, you share the same parents. So in other words, your origin story is basically the same. And yet, despite all of that, these people ended up sharing more microbes with their partner that they're cohabitating with.
Presumably, there's a third sort of maybe causal variable there, that both of them are from physical intimacy. You would guess, like if a couple is healthy, and they perceive their own relationship as being healthy, then there might be more physical intimacy, and then
100%.
physical intimacy, of course, would obviously increase the shared microbiomes that they have, because what is shared intimacy other than sharing microbes?
That's exactly right. And that's so that absolutely is a part of it, in the same way that kissing can be the sharing of microbes, physical intimacy would be the sharing of microbes as well.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's like
I mean,
fascinating to think about that.
it's hilarious. The more this conversation goes on, the more I think I'm just a robot that's being controlled by the bacteria itself, and I'm not in charge at all. They're down there plotting and scheming and saying we need we need to refill our buddies. Let's go get him to kiss his girlfriend. And I'm not in charge at all. And anything I do is just refueling the army of bacteria in my body that's driving all behavior. I don't
You know
know.
what? We I described this actually in my first book, Fiber Fueled, the way that you just did, which is that I said that you might feel like you're a zombie with your bacterial overlords.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, but and there's some interesting research to suggest that cravings can come from microbes, right?
Right.
So when people who crave chocolate, for example, there's this interesting research to find that there's this chemical that's detectable in the bloodstream of people who crave chocolate, and that chemical is produced by microbes. So I do think that there's something to be said for this, but no, I don't think that we are subjects to our bacterial overlords. I think that we have a shared relationship with them, but that we have free will. We have free will, and I think that the issue though is that, like, for example, dietary change is hard.
Right.
And that's the issue that we all have, is like a lot of these foods that were designed in the last 100 years that populate the majority of our supermarket, they're like strategically designed to bring us back for more. And
Right.
that's a problem.
I think you thinking you have free will is exactly what the microbiome wants you to think, and it's all just a larger scheme. Like it reminds me of, is it Toxoplasma gondii? There's a few viruses that do really interesting things in human behavior, and loved learning these in college because I thought they were so interesting. There's one where an insect will consume some chemical that might have came off the cow's urine or something, and then it makes them crawl to the top of the grass so that the cow eats them, and that's just a virus circulating in its life cycle. There's one that makes is it rats and mice attracted to cat urine so that the cat eats them, and then there's examples in nature of viruses fundamentally hijacking behavior. Now it's simpler behavior, it's of insects, smaller rodents, but is it so far out of the realm of possibility that there is bacterial hijacking going on? I mean, we also don't fully know the true reason behind why we do something, right? There, it's mostly post hoc rationalizations. We talk about frontal cortex rationalizations for why we do something. I'm fully convinced now that bacteria make all the plans. They're in charge. It's just, how do we replicate the microbiome? And then we just use our monkey brain to rationalize all of our actions based on our self-identity. That's the main takeaway I'm getting from this.
Evan, you started as my acolyte, and now I feel like I've created a monster.
No,
Dr. Will Bolsevitz, what an absolute legend. I enjoyed our conversation together so much, and I really hope you enjoyed that clip. If you did, then I really couldn't recommend more. Our full 2 hour long conversation, it was a gut health masterclass. We went into all things mood, motivation, energy levels, to the really strange stuff that you've definitely never heard him talk about before. Check it all out in our full 2 hour long conversation right here.